Hello and welcome. This is Rooflemonger, and my friends, we have a little bit of a developer interview for you coming by the way of Game Informer. So recently, thanks to Game Informer, we did learn about the new dynamic control scheme, and now they've had a chat with the developers, and we're learning just a little bit more about Street Fighter 6. So this is a long interview. This comes from Game Informer issue number 351, if you want to search it down to see the full thing. They go over a lot of things that we well know by this point, but there is some extra juicy bits, and that's exactly what we'll be covering today. The first thing I do want to mention from this interview, and this is something they've said in multiple outlets before, but knowing what we know now versus months and months ago when this was first stated, it really seems extra clear now. In that they say they want a game like Street Fighter 2, the fighting game for everyone, like it was, because back in the day, Street Fighter 2 was simply the biggest game on planet Earth. This is a fighting game for everyone, and also a fighting game for people to get into fighting games. And now that we know so much of the features, so much of the accessibility, so much of just like most recently, like with the new control scheme, it really is a game for everyone. And it's just really bearing out that way. And I'm really glad they've gone with that decision. Now, perhaps to me, the most brilliant thing in this interview, and there is quite a few things for us to cover, but the most brilliant thing comes from producer Kazuhiro Tsuchiya. And he was standing basically for the greater team as a whole for Street Fighter 6. He was lobbying the Capcom higher-ups, you know, like the shot callers, the people who are in charge of the money, right? And he was lobbying for everything the Street Fighter 6 team needed because they had to prevent basically what happened with Street Fighter V's launch. Basically, they wanted Street Fighter 6 to be made with no compromises, no unrealistic deadlines, all the time they need to get the game done. And well, thanks to him, they got it. So specifically here, and this is a quote, "It's very rare to see games come to fruition where they were able to deliver everything the team was aiming for. And that is specifically what Street Fighter 6 is. There's always compromises to be made due to budget or time. And for this game, there was no compromises made. Everything they wanted to put into the game, everything they wanted the game to be, they got it. And it shows very well because Street Fighter 6, well, geez Louise, you'd have to dig pretty deep to find someone who's going to say bad words about Street Fighter 6 at this point, because as far as the entire fighting game community goes, we're all gaga for the game. Certainly a damn far sight away from the Street Fighter V launch. Now, there's also a lot to mention about Ken specifically, and we'll get to that in a moment here, because there is a couple other key notes I want to get to. For one, speaking about that Street Fighter V launch, we do have full confirmation of an arcade mode. Now, I know arcade mode doesn't sound like a lot, it sounds like a basic thing, but as we also talked about in a recent video, Street Fighter V didn't get an arcade mode until 2 years into its lifespan. So making sure arcade mode is in on day one versus 2 years later, it sounds like a pretty decent deal, right? Now, confirmation of the arcade mode is in context to the World Tour mode, in that World Tour mode will be the primary source of lore, of story in Street Fighter 6. But then, to add to that, the arcade modes will have story for each character as well. So hopefully we have your traditional endings for Street Fighter 6 so you can learn about the story, learn about your character, and then when you go to World Tour mode, that's the big dump where you meet all the famous Street Fighter characters and learn whatever the story is going to be. Because right now, we still don't actually know, but on that note, Capcom has stated they'll be working directly with Udon Comics, who usually makes a lot of Capcom-related comics. They'll be working directly with them to put out a 4-issue prequel series to Street Fighter 6. Basically, the story of the comic will be the lead-up to Street Fighter 6. Apparently, it'll be heavily featuring Luke and Ken. Capcom states that they will be providing the plot and the script for these comics, making these comics basically, well, official, canon. One of the things about Street Fighter is there's very few things outside the core games that are canon. So if Capcom's setting the whole thing up, they're doing the plot, they're doing the script, I'd say that's about as canon gets. So there's no dates on anything like this yet. We'll know more in the future, I suppose, but watch out for that. A 4-part prequel comic for Street Fighter 6. And one final very positive note before we get to our Ken talk here is, well, just the amount of money going into Street Fighter 6, the staffing specifically. They state here that the Street Fighter 6 staff is much larger. There's just a lot more people on the development team ready for the post-launch content of Street Fighter 6 than there ever was for Street Fighter 5. More people, more money behind it means more and better post-launch content. So I'm all for that. If you're getting into Street Fighter or any fighting game, it's not like a lot of other games where you just, you play for 5-6 hours and we're done here, you're going to be putting in hundreds, or if you're someone like me, you're probably going to be putting in thousands of hours into this game. So hearing they're extra committed to post-launch content is a very, very good thing. Now, they're not saying what that content's going to be yet, because they can't, right? But they did say, it's in the lines of what you might be thinking in terms of characters, stages, etc. Now, finally, some talk about Ken specifically. So first up here is his classic / nostalgia costume, the regular red gi look that you remember, because he looks pretty different these days, doesn't he? The fresh-faced Ken you remember turned into, well, this, right? So what exactly happened there? So part of Ken's new look is they wanted to convey specifically a look that he is on the run, because we know little bits and pieces right now of the story, but we know things went bad for him and he's basically on the run from the law. They stated they want to change up the character a little bit because, well, Ken's life is a bit too stable, as it were. He's got the wife, he's got the kid, he's a multi-millionaire, so they wanted him to kind of be on the downswing to give him more of a reason to fight. And the classic costume is actually part of the story in the way, because he actually apparently is keeping it, because even though he's on the run, he's trying to keep all of his precious memorabilia. Like even in the default costume where he's raggedy, he still has his black belt wrapped around his arm. As far as the overarching plot goes, apparently he will be fairly important to the plot, and his plotline will tie in with others. And this is specifically about Ken, but it applies to a lot of other characters, I guess. When it says the costume he has the new current raggedy look and the classic gi. They said there will be other costumes for sure, but they want to make sure that the classics got redone in like the current high fidelity engine. So basically the old classic costumes everyone knows now look better than ever. And as mentioned earlier, his story will be part of the prequel comic Udon Comics will be making. Ever since Alpha, Ken's been kind of a sideshow character, honestly, so he's definitely going to be a lot more important this time around. And that is about the long and short of it. Once again, this comes from Game Informer issue number 315. There is a lot more than I've stated in this video that's in the interview. Just a lot of it's been covered to death before. And if you've been following along, you probably know the rest. But these interesting tidbits are here. And honestly, just adds even more positivity to the game. A game that's pretty much nothing but universally held in high regard so far. And it's not even out yet. If anything, throughout this whole interview, the big thing once again for me is just that they fought for quality. They didn't want to compromise on any aspect of the game. And they're going to get that game. They're going to get the game they want to make with no compromises, and that's just awesome. But anyways, my friends, we're at the end of the video. So thank you very much for watching. Hope this video has found you well, and go out and play some Street Fighter.
This is the love making.